All right, we're back at it again here on this Saturday, March 21st, 2026. I am Rick Serritella, broadcasting live from the confines of the Jersey Shore around the football universe. We are 33 days away from destination Pittsburgh. We appreciate you buckling up, hunkering down. We've got 330 2 days in the can and 33 days to go. It's an exciting time here at All Access Football. Of course, the 2026 NFL Draft Bible is coming to you shortly in just a few very short weeks, I promise. We're just crossing our T's, dotting our I's, plugging in those pro day numbers. Of course, Indiana, April 1st is the last mega pro day. Of course, Towson, April 10th is the latest pro day date that I know of. Of course, we'll have some pro day updates later on in the show. This is our wide receiver tight end preview edition. Last week, we ran through quarterbacks and running backs. This week, we'll go through the big board and how it's shaping up. We do have one more big board scouting call here at the NFL Draft Bible Familia. So, the final edition may have a few tweaks, but I think for the most part, the boards are pretty much set. They're locked in. We have some news to update you on as we go on throughout the show. My co-host Russ Lande will be joining me shortly from Phoenix. And of course, we're lucky to have him each and every week hopping on with the big boys talking NFL draft. I'd love to see the usual suspects, Adams exploits. I'm sure Douglas Derner is out there lurking, my New Jersey brethren. Hey, if you got questions, we love to get fired up in the chat room, feedback, questions, interaction. It doesn't just have to be draft related. If you want to talk about some of the NFL trades, how it impacts the NFL draft, we will chop it up with you. All right. As we await Russ Lande, real quickly here over at allaccessfootball.com. I think we still have a pre-draft sale going on to take advantage of the Draft Bible, All Access Annual Pass, all of our insider content. We also always have a discount for our listeners, RIC VIP. We'll get you 30% off RIC VIP, but I'm pretty sure we still have a pre-draft sale going on till midnight tonight. So check that out. Of course, Boston Sports Journal. Appreciate them bringing me on board for their draft coverage. If you're into the Patriots, I've been doing some New England coverage for the Boston Sports Journal, folks. And I will be on location at Boston College and UConn Pro Days on Monday and Tuesday. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, we will have live stream coverage all 3 days of the 2026 NFL Draft. Just want to get that out there to you and make you aware. Especially day 3 coverage. If you're into the day 3 prospects, I feel like our analysis is going to focus on those players, highlight them in a way where the mainstream media just can't or they won't. All right. And also just be on the lookout. We've got our 2027 NFL draft big board shaping up. It's a never ending process. The 2027 draft cycle has already begun. We'll be releasing our big boards, positionals, overall. And of course, that is a prelude into the Lindy's magazines. If you guys are out there and enjoy old school football magazines, we appreciate you picking up the Lindy's. Over 40 years of publication, one of the very few, if not the last, football magazine publication still in circulation. And so we've already begun the process for that. Now, with that being said, let's dive into the big board, shall we, with some wide receivers. To do that with me here each and every Saturday, we're live 10 a.m. Eastern. Make sure you smash that like, share, subscribe button, get our new show alerts. We'll be back next week with offensive line, but today is wide receivers and tight ends. And of course, he cut his teeth in the UCLA recruiting. Back in the day, of course, he worked his way to the St. Louis Rams, Cleveland Browns, where he was an NFL scout, also a scout with the XFL, and a front office executive with numerous Canadian Football League organizations. Of course, a former member of the CBS Today Show, a mentor at Sports Management Worldwide. Always a shout out to those folks. And a professor at Concordia University. Checking in. He's a worldwide traveler from London to Chicago. This week he's in Phoenix. Big Russ Lande checking into the show. How we doing, Russ?
I'm doing great, man. What's going on there? Beautiful
You're looking good,
Jersey
man.
Shore in Arizona. What do we got going on?
Yeah, from the beach to the desert, we got you covered, coast to coast coverage.
And I got to just add in for those people watching, Rick, as a good friend who's nice enough to share his almost completed draft guide with me this week. And I got to tell you, folks, if you're watching this, you probably love the draft anyway. But if you like the draft, go get it. I mean, I've always been impressed with what Rick does over the years. That's part of what built our friendship. But this year, he stepped it up. I think part of it is Rick probably stepped aside, let all those other people, they wrote the reports so they were going to be accurate. And Rick just made sure it all looks nice. But it is phenomenal, folks. If you want a draft guide this year, this is the one to get. Rick just smashed it out of the park as usual.
Oh, thanks, Russ. I appreciate it, man. It's a consuming process. And you're right. The Draft Bible Familia has done a wonderful job. Will Donahue, Lauren Davidoff, Dom Ambrios, Jarrett Regal. They've done like I said, the best draft publication we've put out in 24 years. And I appreciate the words. I didn't pay Russ to say that. He does have a sneak peek preview of the Draft Bible. So that was unscripted. And we appreciate the compliment there, Russ. And we're going to get into wide receivers and tight ends. And, starting off with the wide receiver position, the more I study it, the more I feel like this is a relatively deep class. I mean, there's a lot of talented wide receivers, and it's really what's your flavor of the week, right?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, I think if you were talking other years, guys like Jeremy Bernard from Alabama, who is probably not going to go until day 2, I think he'd get in discussion as a first-round pick. A guy like Malachi Fields, another huge receiver, which the NFL is looking for all over the place, is another guy I think would be getting, even though he ran the slow 40 at 4.61, I think he would be getting some consideration late in the first round if this wasn't such a deep class. And let's be fair, analytics didn't play such an enormous role in drafting. I think that he would be in that discussion. But the question really is, of these top guys, we both know half of them are going to fail. So which are we going to correctly identify the half that make it, or are we going to be the ones that pick the guys that aren't going to make it? To me, that's the big question that really comes in this class, because there is so much talent. And even late, we get into guys like Elijah Surratt, Josh Cameron. I mean, there's a lot of talent that's going to go on day 3 of this draft of guys that have a chance to really be productive NFL receivers.
No, I agree. And, I did a draft mailbag for the Boston Sports Journal, folks. And, wide receiver is a position of need. Edge rusher is a position of need for the Patriots. And one of the questions was, which position do you wait on if you have to choose one? And to me, the edge rushers, almost every team is looking for an additional edge rusher. Those guys get pushed up the board. So my response was, especially this year's draft class, wide receiver, if you're going to wait, you wait on the wide receiver, because day 3, you can find an impact type of wide receiver. And on day 3, I winded up giving them Xavion Thomas from LSU and Eli Heidenreich from Navy, role players, right? Gadget guys that could open up the offense, right? But they can give you 20, 25 reps a game and have an impact role. And I think that's what you're going to find in this year's wide receiver class. We'll kind of put them in tiers. We'll try to take them like 10 at a time. I'll run through the board and you can tell me your thoughts and feedback. Now, top of the board.
I just got to say, like you mentioned, Rick, of day 3. Look at the Rams. The Rams have been killing it for a decade. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, 3rd round, 5th round. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to go use a first round pick. Now, obviously, a guy with the talent of a Tyreek Hill, you might consider a guy like that in the first round. But Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, even Tyreek Hill in the 6th round because of his off-field baggage. You don't have to go use a high pick. And especially after what I've seen so far of Marvin Harrison Jr., I am not taking a receiver who's unwilling to run in the first round. I don't care if you look like you run faster than Tyreek Hill times 2. I at least want to have a rough number of vertical jump, short shuttle, 3-cone, and 40 to plug into my system to have at least a little historical data. I don't want to base it on, hey, he looks like he's a good athlete on film. I don't think he can run. Now he's unwilling to run. I'm going to have to go with the fact I don't think he can run. And that's a little scary to me if you're not willing to run. It tells me you don't lack confidence, or you lack confidence.
Yeah, no, it's a big red flag, and we're going to get into that actually. That's a perfect leeway into the top of the big board because one of those wide receivers is in that exact predicament. I'll just run through the first 10 guys or so on the board. Carnell Tate, Ohio State, Makai Lemon, USC. I think those two guys are locked in. For me, Chris Bell out of Louisville is number 3, with Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State number 4. I'm going to come right back to that in a second. Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana at 5, Denzel Boston, Washington at 6, Zachariah Branch, Georgia at 7. Right there, there's 7 first-round candidates. Then you've got guys like KC Concepcion, Texas A&M, Antonio Williams, who I think has been a forgotten man, but tested very well, is healthy now out of Clemson. And then Jacoby Lane and Jeremy Bernard, 10 and 11, USC, Alabama. But let me just go back. You talk about guys who don't want to run. And if I'm going to draft an injured wide receiver, which one do I feel more confident about, Chris Bell or Jordan Tyson? For whatever it's worth, I actually think Bell is the better talent, but I have more confidence in his durability because they're both hurt. But Tyson's been hurt going back to his high school days, Russ. And now this week we have the report. He had this hammy injury. He hasn't played a game in 3.5 months. Didn't work out at the combine. Now he's not working out at his pro day. Apparently, he re-aggravated this hamstring injury. But it's the same old song and dance with Jordan Tyson. This is what you get. And now you have to weigh the risk reward of, do you want to invest a first round pick? Because talent wise, you can argue he's the best talent wide receiver in the draft.
Yeah.
But when a guy just shows up on the inflammatory report year after year after year, it's hard for me to put a lot of stock into it.
Well, there's no doubt. And it's funny because I still remember when I first got hired in this business, Jack Faulkner, the old LA Rams, before we moved to St. Louis. Jack had been in the business, like I like to joke, since Moses was walking around. So Jack had been in a long time, and he always had this old saying that I thought was hysterical. He would always point to a guy when we get closer to the draft that had a bunch of injuries. He goes, those guys who are hurt in college, they're always going to be hurt in the pros. And I remembered it, and I took it as like, okay, that's a great piece of advice from an old guy who's been around. But you heard a lot of people saying, oh, you can't take that. You got to look at the information that now, 20 years later, analytics has taken over. And what does analytics say? They say my old guy, Jack, was not only correct, he was more correct than even thought, because the data shows 100% virtually if you missed a certain number of games in college due to non sort of fluke injuries, that you are likely to miss a significant portion of games in the pros. Does that mean it's 100%? No, there are exceptions. There are guys that break that mold. But like you're talking about, if I'm choosing between a guy like Jordan Tyson, who's been hurt a bunch, and a guy like Chris Bell, who has the ACL that he's hurt, but Chris has had the ACL, but maybe other than that, been more healthy, whereas Tyson has had lingering different issues throughout his college career. That's a major concern. And neither one of us is a medical expert. We're not trying to give you the medical diagnosis for what the long-term prognosis for each injury is. We're just looking at the bigger picture of guys that have been dinged a lot in college, often struggle to stay healthy in the pros. And the reality is, and this is something that Butch Davis really stressed at the Browns, was availability is a gradable trait. Players that can stay healthy matter. And coaches want guys who show up every week. They don't have to be great. They just got to be consistent and predictable. Part of that is being able to show up. So, yeah, you make a great point. Do I feel comfortable with what I think is the most physically gifted receiver in the draft in Tyson? Do I feel comfortable making him a first-round pick? I wouldn't. I think there's too much risk there.
Yeah, I would be very, very leery, and I'm starting to wonder now if guys like Omar Cooper and Denzel Boston even get selected ahead of a Jordan Tyson. And, a guy like Zachariah Branch, I'd love to have this guy on my team. I just don't see a path for him in the first round because, again, just the depth at the top end of the wide receiver class. I don't know if there's any true wide receiver ones or all pro wide receivers, but it's just very, very talented. And I think you would agree. Is Tate and Lemon the first two off the board, do you think?
I think so. And it's not so much that I would say Tate and Lemon are so much far above and beyond Tyson and Boston and Cooper in terms of pure talent and what they do on the field. Part of it is I don't have concerns about injury with Tyson, with concern in Boston. I mean, there are going to be teams that are a little bit concerned about, hey, you're not working out, what's going on? So there are things that make you question. At least with Tate and Lemon, you're saying, okay, I've seen it on the field, I've seen them work out, I feel confident that what the numbers say, the analytics, the explosion grades, and we've talked about it almost every week. We talked about every team has their own sort of protected, they don't share with anybody the codes they've come up with, quote unquote, for their speed grade, their explosion grade, their athleticism grade, which combine testing numbers, wearable metrics that the players wear. Well, you combine those, and then you have guys like Tate and Lemon who do well on those tests, who then did it on the field. They aren't afraid to test. That makes you more comfortable that you say, you know what, even if he doesn't become a number one, I'm very confident these guys will be good, solid number two receivers. That's what you want. You want to get base hits. You can't always swing for the home run. Jordan Tyson could be a home run, could also be out of the league in 2 years. And this is a deep class of receivers. There's so many guys I can't wait to talk about today. I mean, you mentioned Zachariah Branch. To me, no doubt the most twitchy, explosive kid in the whole draft. I mean, he does things Tariq Hill type twitchiness. But the problem is he's really a 1 year guy. I mean, he didn't really – and how's this for crazy? Malachi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, and this kid were in the same room at USC. I mean, it's sort of crazy.
That's incredible. Right? Yeah. 3 guys in the top 10.
Yeah, it tells you – first, it gives Zachariah a little bit of an out. Like, hey, he had 2 guys around him, so maybe that's part of why he couldn't play a lot and put up the huge numbers. But if you're an NFL team, where do you feel confidence-wise? Hey, this is a 1 year guy. It makes you a little nervous. The failure rate is not like quarterbacks. There are a lot of guys who've been successful with only 1 year as a productive receiver in college. But what makes you say, okay, Zachariah at 5'8", 177, busting out and being great for Georgia is a safer bet than Deion Burks, who's basically the same exact size, maybe a little bit heavier, and he's been more productive in college. So, like, where do you fall if you're looking for that twitchy little short slot guy? Are you going to risk the first rounder on Branch when you could maybe sit in the second or third and get Burks?
Valid point. And we got some of those speedy guys in this next batch here. We mentioned Jacoby Lane at 10, Jeremy Bernard at 11, Kevin Coleman Jr. from Missouri, Brennan Thompson, Mississippi State, more speed, Skylar Bell from UConn, Chris Brazo II from Tennessee, who I see some people as a very high pick. I think he's a very raw route runner, and I have my reservations about Chris Brazel. Deshaun Stribling from Ole Miss, Deion Burks, who you just alluded to, from Oklahoma, Josh Cameron from Baylor, who I'm a huge fan of. I have Caden Weegan from Iowa in this range just because
that I was right there with you. I was waiting for you to say his name. He's a guy that I look at and think, okay, if I'm on day 3 and I want a little twitchy, I mean, is he as twitchy as Branch? Maybe not, but I got to tell you, he's pretty twitchy. And when you
nobody could cover him at the Shrine Bowl. I mean, he was separating. I mean, they weren't even close. They weren't even in the vicinity.
And then you add in his return ability, his special teams ability when he's not returning. I mean, this kid's got something to him. I think this kid, whether he goes, I think there's a chance he goes in the 3rd round. I really do think he could go higher than people are thinking. But this kid is going to play at the NFL level. I think even if it takes him 2 years to really find that home as a receiver, I think he's going to make an immediate impact on teams. Then, if it takes him a little longer as a receiver, he's going to be a good slot. I like him. I was so excited waiting for you to throw his name out there. He's a guy I'm very pumped for.
Yeah, one of the most exciting players in the draft, and maybe the best return man I've ever evaluated coming out of college. We got a comment from Skeethra in the chat room. Skeethra282, your guy Jeremy Bernard, hands down my favorite wide receiver. Zone killer, fastest 3-cone drill at the combine. He's a child of God and has rushing upside, and that's what I like about Jeremy Bernard. He can skin a cat 9 different ways, right? You see him on the bubbles. He takes end arounds, reverses, line up in the backfield if you want. He could take you deep, beat you in the long game. He's a very
and I'll add, not only can he do it, unlike a lot of guys nowadays, he was willing to line up in the backfield. A lot of guys nowadays, they're like, I'm a receiver. This kid, what did he do? Alabama needed him in the backfield. He jumped in the backfield. This kid, to me, there's a lot there. I know the shooting goes well as he had hoped. There were some ups and downs, but when you watch what he can do, he and the kid Dylan Bell are two guys to me that the upside, the potential is so exciting because they're so talented. And while their production this year may not have been as dominant as people thought, both those guys get me pumped up and excited.
No doubt about it. And it's Ski Throw 282 with Jordan Hudson, SMU Mustang. We've checked him out, a little bit up and down with the drops. That concerns me a little bit, but he is elusive in the open field. And I do think he's probably a possible late day 3 guy. Senior Bowl invite, too. Had a pretty solid week down there in Mobile. So we appreciate the comments, the questions, the concerns, the feedback. Doug Dorner, Adams Exploits. We got the chat room lit up. Make sure you hit that like, share, subscribe button. And we got some more speedsters as we keep running through this list. Russ, we left off with Elijah Surratt. Then you got Barrion Brown from LSU, another return guy. Bryce Lance from North Dakota State, a big, tall, fast guy. Cyrus Allen, who's our highest-rated non-combine invite wide receiver. Xavier Thomas from LSU. We got Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, who probably needs a bump up there. Donovan McCulley from Michigan, who I was very impressed with along the All-Star trails. Jamichael Sturdivant from Florida, who kind of pulled a disappearing act after he left UCLA. Ted Hurst from Georgia State is a hard guy to peg just because that kind of mid-major small school pedigree, tested through the roof, phenomenal size, incredible production. Trey Wallace out of Ole Miss. Jeff Caldwell from Cincinnati. Brings us to the top 30 guys. Anybody there that stands out to you?
Well, the Hurst kid, to me, that to me is the guy that you really get excited about. I mean, this kid isn't just a small school kid that's 5'10", 185 who can run.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big, when you look at this kid, a lot of the time when you go to a small school, even if they're tall, they look trim and thin and they look like they're not ready for the big boy show. This kid looks like an NFL dude on the hoof. Like when this kid comes off the bus, you're like, dang, that's an NFL receiver. And then you see how he tests. Then you put on the Georgia State film and you see the kid do some electric things. He's that guy that, are there some raw things about him? Would you like a little bit more precision and consistency at times of his footwork? No question. But when I look at him, I think, man, if I'm sitting there third, top of the fourth, and I'm a team that's looking, especially if I've got a veteran guy, a bigger veteran guy who can help this kid sort of transition from small school to the NFL, can be sort of that mentor. Not that Keenan Allen ever tested like this kid, but if I were a team with a guy like a Keenan Allen, a bigger, older receiver, this would be a guy I want to get in there because let him learn from a star for a year and then let him blossom. I think Hurst has got a chance to explode. Also, the kid that I knew nothing about until he got the invite to, I don't even remember if it was the senior or which one it was, the kid from John Carroll, the Montgomery kid.
Oh, Tyron Montgomery,
he doesn't get a lot of national pub, I think partly because there's so much talent this year receiver. But again, a guy that on day 3, I'd feel really comfortable rolling the dice. I mean, this kid, he's smooth to me and more polished than a lot of like small school, like John Carroll's a low-level school for football in terms of it's not a P4 or D1. This kid, to me, has got a lot there. I really like Tyron Montgomery. Great guy to take a roll of dice on day 3 of the draft.
Yeah, he was not a combine guy, but he started off at the American Bowl, was one of the top talents down there, worked his way up to the Senior Bowl, 5'11" and 3/8, $190. He was twitchy, man. He really made a name for himself down there in the trails. So he's in this next batch where we have Eric McAllister from TCU, Kendrick Law from Kentucky, Reggie Virgil from Texas Tech has been getting some 30 visits, CJ Daniels from Miami, Dylan Bell from Georgia, Caleb Douglas from Texas Tech, Malik Benson from Oregon, Chase Roberts just had a great pro day from BYU, Emmanuel Henderson Jr., who was, again, buried in Alabama, did nothing for 3 years, comes to Kansas, has a breakout year, special teams phenomenon. Tyron Montgomery, who you just mentioned, John Carroll. I'll go a little bit into the 40s and 50s. Aaron Anderson, LSU, Lewis Bond, Boston College, Romelio Brenson's SMU, Colby Young from Georgia, Noah Thomas from Georgia, Eric Rivers, Georgia Tech. Anthony Smith, ECU, who I love. Chris Hilton Jr. from LSU. Vinny Anthony II, who had a great Senior Bowl. Colin Lacey from Louisville. Then a small school guy, Jalen Waldhall from Incarnate Ward. Jordan Hudson, who we mentioned. Keelan Marion from Miami now. We get to guys like that. So that just, I think, speaks. Trevor Pena, I'll be talking about with the Pro Day updates from Penn State, another return guy. So, again, well into day 3, I think you can find impact wideouts.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the Marion kid you mentioned from Miami. I mean, you talk to the kid that he really is almost that kid that you love the film in terms of if you just take his catches, put it on one reel, you like how he runs routes, you like how he catches the ball. But when you just look at the pure skills, you say, okay, I don't think he can run away from people. I think he has good, solid speed, but he's not special. I don't think he's a phenomenal, rare, twitchy guy like the Branch guys or the Burks guys. So you're trying to find, okay, where does this kid fit? He does a lot of things on film I like, but he doesn't hit a lot of the twitchy metrics, the speed metrics. So how does he fit? But I think as a football player, there's a lot to like about him. I mean, the kid knows how to get open. I think one of the things he does a really good job of is when he gets to the break point, he doesn't just get out of his break correctly. He gets his head and his hands around correctly. A lot of guys come out of that break, even if they come out fast, and they're late putting their head and their hands up. And if you don't have your head and your hands up, some quarterbacks that's not going to affect because some guys throw to you once they see you make the break. But the elite quarterbacks, that ball's out, it's hitting you as you turn out of that break. And if your head and hands aren't up, you're going to be fighting it every time. So that's something that when I look at Marion, I think, oh, there's something there with this kid. I'm not saying this is a guy that's going to go day 3 and become a Pro Bowler, but I think he's an example of the depth in this class. There are a number of day 3 receivers. You mentioned a handful of them, whether it's the Montgomery kid from John Carroll, the Sobakowitz, whatever it is.
Illinois State, the Redbirds, yeah.
Yep, or even the Proctor kid from Johnson C. Smith. There's going to be at least 2 guys that go on day 3 that turn into not just guys that contribute, make a roster, but I think in 2 years, they're going to be starters in the league. So a guy like Marion, he's very intriguing to me as a day 3 sort of throw a dart at a kid that shows a lot of the things, just doesn't look like a premier special athlete.
Yeah, he has some return ability too. Doug Dorner in the chat says Miami has the Pro Day this Tuesday. And good point, 746 receiving yards in a crowded room. They had C.J. Daniels. They had Malachi Toney. A lot of and Carson Beck, not a big downfield thrower of the football. So he's got to create after the catch. He's got that elusiveness. I will say I was put on to Keelan Marion very, very early when I was doing UConn Illustrated. So I went up to stores many, many times where I'll be out on Tuesday for Pro Day. And the one thing that bothered me, I'd go to practice. He'd have a workload management day. The hammies.
Those are not good.
So that really stuck with me. But I always loved the player, Keelan Marion. All right, he's Russ Lande. I'm Rick Serritella. We're doing our wide receiver and tight end preview show. We're going to take a quick 30-second break, all right, and we'll come back and break down the tight ends. All right, we're back at it again. RIC in the place to be, Rick Serritella. Tell me like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything pigskin. We got the professor, Russ Lande, checking in from Phoenix today. We're breaking down wide receivers and tight ends. We just broke down the wide receivers. We're going to dive into tight ends. Don't go anywhere later on in the show. I have some Pro Day updates from the week that was, something we've been doing each and every week at the end of the show. Of course, next week we'll be breaking down the offensive line, Russ. The big uglies, my favorite positional preview. That. Yes, I can't wait to dig into the trenches next week. But this week we got wide receivers.
Do we just spend the whole time on the kid whose name I'm forgetting, Tofu? Lafu from Utah. Do we just spend the whole time talking about his short arms? Is that
Well,
just going to be the whole time?
well, I'm glad. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to save it for the pro day. Before we get to tight ends, I'm curious to get your thoughts because, yeah, Fanu, 32 and 1/8 at the combine, 32 and 7/8 at his pro day, so a whole half inch longer. And I will tell you this from doing the draft Bible, I haven't said too much about it publicly. I've been waiting to complete the book. But my biggest takeaway from assembling the draft Bible this year, and I did something different that I never did in years past, is I'm actually listing the combine numbers, the all-star numbers, and the pro day numbers all in each player's profile. And I can tell you this, Russ, the whoever did the combine measurements should be held accountable, and they should go back to school. They should go to the Russ Lande School of Measurements because I will tell you this, almost every arm measurement is off by a significant margin, and they all came in shorter at the combine. And we don't just have the pro days to go by, but we also have the all-star circuit to go by. And it's really actually disappointing because I don't even think that the combine measurements are credible this year. And that's just how I feel from going through it.
No, and one of the things, and I can't say for sure that they still do it, but I know they did it up until 5 or 6 years ago, is anytime a player's, like say in this case, the Fanu, his arms, anytime one player has a significant discrepancy between a hard measurement, we're not talking time things or jumping, because that's unfair. A player could just have a bad day and a good day. But where it's a hard measurement, generally what they'll do is they'll say, okay, let's look at every player that person measured at the combine, compare it to other measurements, whether it was the spring stuff for Blasto National, the All-Stars, or their pro days, because maybe it's an indication, and it's not to knock them. Trust me, I measured 3,000 people. I can promise you my first year on the road as a Blasto scout was not nearly as efficient and accurate as my third year with the Browns or all of my subsequent years doing the CFL tryouts where we would measure kids. So part of it is learning, getting consistent with where you put your hand, where you put the measurement. So I know the NFL, at least in years past, was very conscious of if one guy was way off, they would check it to make sure, hey, were we off on a lot? Because there was one year way back when, if I remember correctly, the hand measurements were all off by about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch on everybody. And it turned out they had just, the person who had done it, there was a little mishap with how he was taught to do it. And he was shown a little bit more precisely exactly how he has to do it. So I hope that they will look at this, because you can't have measurements. I get 1/8 of an inch. I even get 1/4 of an inch.
Right.
When you're talking 1/2 an inch or more, that is a significant change in arm length. That's drastic. And like the other thing we've never talked about, just a tidbit for the fans, there is a reason NFL Combine, All-Star games all measure in the morning. And they try to get pro days to measure in the morning because you are taller in the morning by 1/8 to 1/4 inch because your body compresses over the day. So teams want constant static data that's as close to accurate as it can be because it's taken at the same time of day. So that's just my random tidbit for the day about height measurements.
No, it bothers me a lot. And I would imagine like the combine scouts should be vetted. Like these should be veteran guys. So I'm not sure.
It's a tough thing because you generally have veteran guys that'll do the height because that's obviously something that a lot of people are watching and everything. But the hand and arm, a lot of the time, it's the guys that are doing the combine scouting for national. Most of the time, they get it correct. And I think it's important that we stress that 95% of the stuff that gets done at the combine measurement-wise is on. There's just occasionally a year, maybe one of every 5 or 7 years, where one measurement for one day usually. It's not even usually for the whole combine. Sometimes it's for one day that they're off. And with O-linemen, and I think I mentioned it before, the thing you always have to look for when you see a discrepancy for arm length for O-line is look at the height of the person measuring, because someone that is 5'8", 5'9", it can be harder than someone, and I'm 6 feet, and I even had challenges at times. When you're measuring a kid that's 6'6" or 6'5", you have to really, you're trying to pinpoint it, where a guy that's 6'3" or 6'5", measuring, it's a lot easier. So there is something there. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I just was joking about
No,
the new one we talking about our fight.
I think one of the most important storylines that won't be discussed leading up to the draft. And
It would be great. And maybe you and I do this before next week. If you want to send me over some stuff, we could take all the O-line arm measurements with the same guys from that were at All-Star games, pro days, and compare them and say, okay, was there a significant discrepancy on a lot, or is it three guys? Because if it's three guys happen. That's just part of life. If it's 20 guys, that's where you say, wait a second, what are we doing? Did someone miss the boat? What happened?
A lot of the discrepancies seem to come on the offensive line. We'll take a look at that next week. And I figured at least if you have three measurements up there, it seems like the combine usually is the shorter of the three. So you can kind of average it out. And I think that's just the boat that we're in this year, unfortunately. All right, Russ, Lande, Rick Serritella. That's our measurement rant, scout talk that gets under our skin and really irks us. But on to the tight ends. And I think we'll get at least one tight end in the first round, Russ. Kenyon Sadiq, I think, from Oregon has kind of separated himself from the rest of the crowd. And behind him, you got the likes of Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt, Max Clare of Ohio State, Michael Trigg from Baylor, Oscar Delp from Georgia. That's the top five. I'll stop right there for your thoughts.
Firstly, I agree with you. I think Stowers has a chance maybe to squeeze in, but he's probably a second-round guy. I agree. Sadiq, and it's funny because when you watch Sadiq, I think what you see is what could be, because their offense didn't always get him featured. There were times where you would be like, where is this guy? He's so gifted. Why is he not making plays? Yeah, I like Sadiq. I will tell you, though, even at 6'3", teams don't love 6'3" tight ends. They prefer taller. I do think he will probably be a first-round pick. I think it's a good class of tight ends. I think there's some unique guys. I really like Stowers. I think he's an underrated football player. I think he's going to be better in the pros than he was in college, and he was really productive in college. I think he's going to catch a ton of balls. I think that there's some unique guys, I think, when we get outside of that top 5 or 6 that really jump out to me. You mentioned the Oscar Delp kid. He, to me, is a real mystery guy because when he does it right, he looks phenomenal. But there are games where I look at him and go, where are you? What are you doing? And so to me, he's one of the real mysteries. But there's so much talent to me. That's not a fair word to say. There are a handful of talented guys that are going to go at day 2 or really even in day 3 that I'm very intrigued to see where they end up at the NFL level.
Yeah, the scheme and fit will go a long ways in determining their success, obviously. Delp had his pro day this week, Russ. 6'5", 245, ran a 4.4 840, 38.5-inch vert, 10-foot broad. So the athleticism is certainly there. And I think he was one of those guys that had the medical issue at the combine, so he wasn't allowed to work out. So he did lay down an impressive pro day workout. All right. Second tier, you mentioned some interesting guys. Tanner Koziel from Houston, big, lengthy target. Justin Jolie, one of those UConn transfers who finished up at North Carolina State, one little stockier, squattier type of tight end, packed on about 20 pounds or so. Marlon Klein from Michigan.
That's my guy.
One of those inline guys who could stretch out and be a factor in the pass game. As can Sam Roosh from Stanford, who's right in the same category there, along with Eli Raritan from Notre Dame. So I think Klein, Raritan, Roush, you kind of have a cluster of big-bodied tight ends who can block and won't hurt you in the pass game. I will say Roush had 8 drops this year from Stanford. That is one red flag. And then Klein, when he went through the gauntlet drill in the combine, his hands were not as consistent as I would have liked to see. But that's my only beef with Marlon Klein. And he's an incredible athlete. I think Roush is a good athlete. I think Klein is a step above those 3 guys.
Yeah, Klein is really unique. I mean, if we forget football and just look at the testing and the athleticism and just watch him move around, he does some freaky things. I mean, he's long as heck, but he looks trim. He can run. He gets started quickly off the ball. And there's a lot to like there. Is he smooth and fluid in the football side of things? No. He looks a little awkward turning his shoulders to catch. Like you were talking about catching the ball. It's not always exactly the way it should be. He's one of those guys that I think his future is it's going to really be determined. Does he go to a team? And it's not about scheme. It's not about winning or losing. It's does he go to a tight ends coach who is really good at getting into the nitty gritty and teaching fundamentals? If he goes to a team with an excellent special teacher, I think he could really blossom. But if he goes to a team where the tight end coach is more of a scheme guy and make sure you run this route and how to get open and doesn't really focus on the little things, I think he could be a guy that washes out. Another guy that I think is really sort of underrated. He's made a few big plays this year, and I think he looks gigantic on film. I'm surprised he's only 6'4", 246. Is Daquan Wright out of Mississippi. When I watch Ole Miss play, I would have sworn this kid was going to measure in the 6'6", 260 range. He looked big, thick-bodied, catching the ball. I was surprised that he didn't measure bigger, but I really like him as a player. I think this kid is smooth. I think he's got good hands. I think there are times when he's running with the ball, he's a little bit herky-jerky, but he, to me, is a very interesting guy. I'd love to get him. To me, he's like a little bit like Klein in that he's a little bit like a moldable piece of clay, but I think he's a different athlete than Klein. He looks and plays bigger than his size.
Well, he's 6'4", but he's got almost 33-inch arms, so that's why he probably looks longer than
that. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so going in the next batch, Roush brings us to the end of the top 10. The next 10, you got Dallin Bentley from Utah, Joe Royer from Cincinnati, R.J. Maryland from SMU, Nate Bokercher from Texas A&M, Matthew Hibner from SMU, John Michael Jellenberg from Wyoming, Jack Endries from Texas, Josh Cuevas from Alabama, Will Kasmerick from Ohio State, and Lake McCree from USC. I'll tell you that Kasmerick, you watch the Buckeyes games and Max Clear gets all the love. And then Kasmerick comes up with the big catch and a big block. And he transferred over. The school is slipping my mind, but he came from a smaller school, didn't have a huge role the first year, but really stepped up his game this year. And to your point, day 3, you need an inline blocker, tight end 3, Will Kasmerick out of Ohio State. I like what this young man's about. 6'5" and 4/8 inches, 261 pounds. Didn't run the greatest 40, Russ, 4.74, but I don't even care. This guy's not going to be asked to be a huge factor in the passing game. I like what he brings to the inline game.
Firstly, I like what he brings to the inline game. And I also will say a 4.7, yeah. Is that great for a guy if I'm going to ask him to stretch the D and run and post and corner routes? No. But if I'm asking a guy to run little stop routes, quick outs, quick digs on 3 and 4 steps off the line of scrimmage, I mean, with his size, it's a perfect fit. Now, do I think he's going to be a 1? No, I think he's going to be a back. I think he's going to be your number 2 tight end, and I think he's got a chance to be a really good one. I like a lot of what this kid brings. He wouldn't be where he is. And when I say this, wouldn't be as prepared for the NFL, wouldn't be able to handle stuff. Being basically the number 2 guy at Ohio State, handling the hard coaching, handling not getting to be the star, and he still does it, works hard, competes hard. You don't see laziness on the field. You don't see him getting whipped due to not giving an effort. I think there's a lot to like about this kid. If you're sitting there in the 6th round or even the 5th round maybe, and you're looking at a team, and especially if you're a team that has a guy like a Kyle Pitts or a Brock Bowers, and there are going to be times where you're going to want to have a motion guy to block and a receiving guy, maybe want to do something where you can put somebody physical in there so you can open up things for your speed tight end. To me, this guy's Mark, he's got something to him. And I also think he is better hands-wise than he gets credit for. This guy is smooth catching the ball. I really like him. He's a guy I think has a lot of upside going forward. And I will say there's a handful of guys that, to me, when we go beyond sort of the look of sort of true tight ends, we get into the guy like the Breedsons, and the kid that I love, the kid that probably got more attention this year than anybody thought, was a kid from Indiana, the Nowakowski, who's sort of really a fullback H-back, but I love that kid. I think he's going to play in the league for a long time. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, but I think he's going to be a great blocker. He's going to be a phenomenal. That's exactly who this kid is. I don't know if he's as athletic as Kushek, but there's a lot of similarities. So there's some interesting guys when we get into day 3. And whether it's Kasmerick whether it's the Kittlesman kid that you mentioned from Tennessee. I've heard a lot
Yep.
about the Hibner kid at SMU because one of my buddies works down there. So there's a handful of unique guys on day 3. I don't think it's as deep a class like we were talking receivers. We're going to find some studs and stars in day 3, but I think we're going to find at least 2 or 3, if not 5 or 6 guys that carve out long careers as role-playing backup tight end, number 2 guys, fullback tight end, depth pieces that also contribute on teams. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see where some of these guys, especially the Nowakowski kid, he's one of my favorites in this draft. I'm so hoping because the Chargers, I'm a Chargers guy, and they use a fullback because Coach Harbaugh believes in knocking guys' heads off with a lead blocker. I'm really hoping this guy ends up in San Diego or L.A., if you want to call them the L.A. Chargers.
Yeah.
People. This guy is a fullback, is an H-back, is a tight end. I just love what this kid brings to the table. I'd love to see him line up for my Chargers.
Yeah, I'm a big Nowakowski fan. I'll get into the fullback rankings. I'll sneak them in too. A couple other tight ends. You mentioned Kitselman from Tennessee. Daquan Wright from Ole Miss probably needs a bump up. Bauer Sharp from LSU. Dan Villari from Syracuse, the former quarterback at Michigan, recruited by Harbaugh.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Interesting kid. Khalil Dinkins, whose father played in the NFL out of Penn State. They just had their pro day this week. Lance Mason from Wisconsin. DJ Rogers from TCU. Seydou Traore is actually from Vanderbilt, I believe, an international pathway program eligible player, which is interesting. And then we got Lewis Hansen is another Harbaugh recruit as a tight end, winded up at UConn. And then Jeremiah Franklin, who has his pro day on Monday, where I'll be in attendance. Doug Dorner says tight end, Boston College, 6'3", 248. I had him in the spring, 6'3" and 2/8, 248. Right on. Somebody's been reading the draft Bible, Douglas Derner. But he's a day 3 potential tight end as well. Brett Seether from Georgia Tech, I think, deserves a mention. So JT Byrne from Georgia Tech was a guy that really impressed me. He spoke to our friend Connie Carberg for about a half hour, 45 minutes. And this kid is just so well put together. Great head on his shoulder. I'm going to sneak in the fullback rankings real quickly here, Russ. I have Jaron Kanek from Oklahoma listed as a fullback. I don't know where to slot him. He's almost a tweener, a good football player with no true position. 6'2", 234, ran a 4.52. Is he really a blocker, though? Not really. Is he an H-back at 6'2"? I don't know. I don't know what you do with Jaron Kanek. But
I think you hope you can find a way to get him the ball because he seems to catch the ball well and he runs well. I just think he's that guy that if
how do you use a roster spot on a guy like, I don't know.
Well, you know how you do is if you have an OC who's sort of creative. If you have an OC who's going to stick with what's always been, probably not a guy that's going to fit. But if you have an offensive coordinator that says, you know what, I'm going to be creative, I'm going to find a way. And yeah, is he the perfect height? No, he's probably 6'2"-ish. Oh, not probably. He is 6'2"-ish. We have the measurements. What am I saying? Probably for he is 6'2", but that doesn't mean he's a 5'11" guy trying to catch balls. He's 6'2". You're talking an inch shorter than Sadiq, who's going to go in the first round. So if you're a smart offensive coordinator, you say, hey, this kid's athletic. I think he's a unique guy in terms of I thought he caught the ball really well for Oklahoma. If you're a smart team, I think there's something there for this kid, whether you're using him out of the backfield, whether you're splitting him out. I think there's something there for this kid. I like this kid. I'm glad you mentioned him. I totally slipped my mind. We had talked about him when we talked about Oklahoma earlier in the year. I think this kid's got a future as a role-playing pass catcher at the next level.
Yeah, and these fullbacks, it's really like, what are you looking for? It's hard to rank them, but Kanak, Riley Nowakowski from Indiana. How about the Wolverine, Max Bredesen from Michigan, 6'2", 252, prototypical size.
Old school hammerhead fullback. He's what, 30 years ago, teams would have been so excited. They would have been so pumped, like, we're going to line this guy.
Yeah.
Right. He would have been the guy right in front of Franco Harris. Just go smash somebody out of the way. And there's like 4 teams in the league now that use those guys, so they're not as in style.
Yeah, Truman Werymeyer from North Dakota State, 6'1.5", 248. Seth Adams caught our eye down at the Dream Bowl, San Diego State, 6'2", 260, and then Vaughn Pemberton from Boston College, who I'll see on Monday, 5'11", 230, a little light there, but that brings us to the conclusion of the tight end, wide receiver, fullback preview show. We
Yeah, a
snuck
little
in
throw of the fullbacks there,
well,
sneaking those guys
almost
in.
half the league is up to now. The league works in trends, and you're starting to see them now back into the rotation. I think there's like 12 to 14 teams now actually using a fullback again, which is great to
There's
see.
value in having that guy who can block, but can also block
Yeah.
on the edge and can catch a ball. If you can, the whole thing is if you're a fullback who can catch, you have a role. If you're a fullback who can't catch, it's hard for you to get you on the field because you're not a weapon, and it takes one pass catcher out of my offense.
Yeah, not Nowakowski, now that I think about it, he's probably one of my personal favorite players in the entire draft. Like,
No doubt, he's the guy you got to root for. I would, like I said, I'm just hoping he ends up with the Chargers.
yeah, he'd be a hell of an addition right there with Harbaugh. Oh my God. And if not, then Bredeson.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I
Yeah.
think it's probably leaning towards Bredeson just because the
Yeah.
connection to the school. But I think this kid's a better player than Bredeson.
All right, Russ, we'll get you out of here. I'm going to hit the people with some pro day updates, but we'll be back next week to talk some trench warfare with the big uglies. Any parting shots for the people? What you're looking forward to next week? Anything you want to hit them with on your way out?
Just get excited. Next week we get to talk O-line. There's nothing better than talking about O-line, which guys have a chance, which guys aren't. I love it. And like I said, I saw the preview of the draft Bible. It is, and I know Rick probably catches a lot of heat for it, but I'll say it like I say it all the time. It's the only Bible you need to have, the NFL Draft Bible. Get the other one. This is the one you got to have.
I love it. Put your hand on the Bible. All right. I had a last comment for you, but I'm getting old and I'm forgetting. So, but no, always good to see you. Always appreciate the time, brother. Love chopping it up with you. Oh, I was going to say the Sports Management Worldwide Football GM and Scouting course. I think you have another semester starting soon.
It's in about 5 weeks. We just did, or actually, no, in about 3 or 4. We just did linebackers this week. So next week is defensive backs. The week after that is sort of how you take everything we taught you and start making your inroads.
I thought I saw the next cycle starting up in April there somewhere, and
it's somewhere in April.
The draft.
Yeah, somewhere in April. And I want to give a shout out. I got to find his name real quick if I can pull it up on my phone here. One of the students.
All right, well, while you're pulling that up, just if you're interested, over at smww.com, the Football GM and Scouting course, the most popular course that they offer. Guys like Russ, Dane Vandernat, John Wooten, Mark Dominic are all involved. All people who have worked in NFL front office executive roles and have worn those shoes. So if you want to get a good foundation and baseline for the Football GM and Scouting course, you can go over to smww.com, click on the courses. And like Russ said, I think it's April 27th might be the start date.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Now, I just wanted to throw out a note. A kid that took my class, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, named Brendan Lamana. Took the class, impressed me. I helped write. I think I wrote I wrote him a letter of recommendation. He was the director of player personnel or pro scouting or whatever for Eastern Illinois, but it was volunteer position last year. He just accepted a position as a player personnel assistant at University of Akron. So excited to see him take another step. He's a really impressive young man, and
well done.
Pumped to see him get that chance. He's a great kid, and I think he's in his early 20s. So I know he's got a bright future, and I'm really excited to see what his next step is and how he's going to help Akron keep getting that football program going in the right direction.
That's phenomenal. The Russ Lande scouting tree continues to grow. We were down at the Nashville Symposium. You had a bunch of students that are now working at the college NFL levels all over the map.
I got a guy with the Falcons. I got a guy with SMU. I got 2 guys at Pro Football Focus. I got a guy with the Ottawa Red Blacks. I mean, they're all scattered around.
A familia over at the Draft Bible doing beautiful work.
That's right. So. I've sent you a bunch of people. Yeah. You can train them even more.
Good shit, Russ. Keep up the good work, man. Thanks for checking in from your Phoenix adventures.
Yes,
and
of course.
Will we be back in Chicago for next week's show?
We will be. I will be back
Okay.
in Chicago, back rolling through the normal life.
All right. Well, safe travels. I'll see you next Saturday, my favorite day of the week. Appreciate the time, brother.
All right, Rick. Thanks as always, brother. Had a blast.
All right, there he is. Russ Lande joins us each and every Saturday here on the All Access Football NFL Draft Watch Show. Now, don't go anywhere because I got some pro day updates. We're going to run through them very rapidly. But first, we're going to do a quick commercial break, 30 seconds. We'll be back right after this. All right, back at it again. Here to put a ribbon on the show. RIC in a place to be. Rick Serritella, telling it like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything pigskin. And we thank you so much for hanging in for the duration of the show and another hour of power in the books here on this March 21st, 2026 edition. Some housekeeping notes and some pro day updates. We'll get into the pro days first. So we've been updating kind of the week that was each and every edition here on the Draft Watch Show. We recapped last week's at the end of the show. We did the first week, the week before that. I actually posted it on the website this week, allaccessfootball.com, with those two video segments isolated. If you just want to get the quick rundown or recap of some of the pro day standouts from the pro day trails. So this week, I try to do my best to gather as much information as I can. There was a lot of pro days, and we mentioned Georgia. Oscar Delp, if you're just tuning into the show, at 6'5", 245, ran a 4.48, 38.5-inch vert, 10-foot broad. This is notable because they caught that medical condition out there at the combine, and he was not allowed to work out, so he laid down a solid workout. Okay, and this Georgia wide receiver room, you know, we mentioned Zachariah Branch, who came over from a crowded room at USC. Well, I mean, they had Noah Thomas and Dylan Bell, two very high pedigree wide receivers. They all did positional work at the Georgia Pro Day workout. Cash Jones, the running back who I saw at one of the All-Star games, very scrawny, skinny looking guy, ran a 4.4 40, probably an undrafted free agent. Now, CJ Allen did not participate, and there are now concerns swirling around CJ Allen, who's a little undersized for the position, refused to work out at the combine, refused to work out at pro day. And as my co-host Russ Lande spent a good portion of time earlier in the show, when you don't work out, it's a huge red flag. It's hard to stand on a table for a guy like that. And CJ Allen, who was kind of in that first round equation, I think now may slide to day 2 because of this. So what is he hiding? What is he concealing? We don't know, but something smells fishy coming out of the CJ Allen camp. All right. BYU, big, fast cornerback, Maury Bamba, blazed a 4.27, one of these under-the-radar cornerbacks, 11'1" broad jump. Definitely a name you need to know for day 3. Was not invited to the All-Star games or the NFL Combine. It'll be interesting to see where he lands. Chase Roberts, 4'5", 140, 4.28 short shuttle. Nice route runner, possession type of wide receiver. Jack Kelly also worked out along with Jake Retzlaff, the quarterback there. Kelly probably in that day 3 range. Retzlaff, I don't think gets drafted. Speaking of quarterbacks, Utah State, Bryson Barnes also worked out this past week with some positional drills, just a name you need to know for the signal callers, as well as Diego Pavier took the center stage down there in Nashville for Vanderbilt. He worked out along with Eli Stowers, who we talked about in our tight end preview. And I know Stowers is also working with Travis Kelce and George Kittle, something he mentioned at the Pro Day workout. But 2 under-the-radar prospects to know from Vanderbilt: Langston Patterson, the cerebral linebacker, and Corday Sidnor, the defensive lineman, inside outside versatility. Two guys not invited to the combine, but could wind up on 53-man rosters. All right, Penn State, Trevor Pena, 5'10". Our guy Jarrett Regal was on location, by the way. Said Trevor Pena had a phenomenal workout. 5'10", the Syracuse transfer, 187 pounds, 19 bench press reps, 4.52 in the 40, 35.5-inch vert, 10.3 broad, 4.11 shuttle, 6.90 3-cone. Very, very impressive. And I think, if anything, he's not really an NFL wideout, but he is a kick returner. I think he's a guy you draft in the 7th round or after the draft, and you just see if he can upgrade your return game. Khalil Dinkins, we mentioned in the tight end, 6'4", 251, 4.72, 25 bench press reps, 32.5-inch vert, 9.11 broad, 4.37 shuttle, 7.28 3-cone. Vega Ione, our number 1 rated offensive line prospect, who we'll talk about next week, 6'4", 326, 31.5-inch vert, 8'8" broad. They got 2 tackles that I like. One being Drew Shelton, 6'5", 313 pounds, 5'16" in the 40, 31-inch vert. And then Nolan Rucci, who I thought was one of the best players at the East-West Shrine Bowl, 6'8", 314, 30-inch vert at 6'8", 314, 9-foot broad, 5'4" in the 40, not so great. 4.87 shuttle, 7.89 3-cone. Those numbers might hurt him a little bit there. All right, Nick Dawkins, I think, is an undrafted priority free agent at center, 6'4", 305, 5'16" in the 40, 32-inch vert, 9'6" broad. Danny Dennis Sutton, a dark horse candidate for the 1st round, 6'6", 261, 4'6", 40, 26 bench press reps, 39.5-inch vert, God bless, 10-11 broad, 6'90" in the 3-cone. His defensive line teammate, Zane Durant, 6'1", 293, 4'75", 33.5-inch vert, 9'4" in the broad. And then one last player from Penn State, the safety, Zaki Wheatley, 6'3", 202, 4'62", 33-inch vert, 10'4" broad, 4'11" shuttle, 6'8", 3-cone. Man, that offensive line with Dawkins, Rucci, Shelton, Vega, Ione, 4 NFL players on that offensive line. Pretty impressive for the Nittany Lions. All right, Jarrett was also the next day over at Temple Pro Day, where the Villanova kids also worked out. And Tami Aratocho, I just butchered his name, and I apologize for that. I really like him out of Villanova. And he also had a wide receiver that really impressed. And I'm going to get you his name, courtesy of Jarrett Regal. The Villanova wide receiver, Luke Kolela. Keep an eye on that young man. He drew some NFL interest at his pro day workout. All right, over to Youngstown State. Max Tomczak, the son of Mike Tomczak, ran a 4.45, 12 bench press reps, 34.5-inch vert, 9'4" broad. He's right around that 6-foot range. Hawaii, I did not get the pro day results, but I want to tell you about Hawaii safety Peter Manumana. A safety you need to know, playmaker, range, propensity to create turnovers. He caught our eye, again, Jarrett Regal down at the Dream Bowl, part of the Dream Bowl scouting staff. So Hawaii with the pro day. Wyoming, Caden Barnett, one of my favorite combine snubs. I saw him at the East-West Shrine Bowl. I think he has starter capability at 6'3" 7/8 a shade under 6'4", 316 pounds, 22 bench press reps, 31 inches, 8'9" broad jump, 4.63 in the shuttle, 7.65 3-cone, and then a couple odds and ends. Kennesaw State, Coleman Bennett. I wanted to give him a shout out because he had a pretty good hula ball, 4.25 short shuttle for him. A couple of storylines that we touched on earlier with Russ. Utah, Spencer Fano came in with an arm length of 32 7/8, a whole half a foot bigger or longer than his combine measurement of 32 1/8. And that's one of the great beauties about the Draft Bible is we're listing the combine, the pro day, the all-star game measurements, and that way you have your ultimate resource. Also, Jordan Tyson, we touched base on, another one of these guys injured, not working out. Russ alluded to the Marvin Harrison Jr. reference. I think Jordan Tyson's draft stock is trending down. And then Jaden Ott. This guy is right now sitting at number 4, I think, on my running back big board. Did not get invited to the combine. He actually worked out at Oklahoma Pro Day and Cal Pro Day, where he began his career. So that was good to see. Put in a good performance from my understanding there. And that is our Pro Day update. Adams exploits with the great Eagles question, and I sure I will be doing some more Birds 365. Did a show for them a couple weeks back, and tight end is certainly on the radar. And Dallas Goedert, probably his last year. They did work out a deal to bring him back. A.J. Brown could be traded on draft weekend. What do the Eagles do early? Because they also need a safety and an edge. You know, it's interesting because the Eagles are not a team that typically drafts, I hate to call them finesse positions, but a wide receiver or a safety in the first round is hard to envision. Although, you know, they could go back to the wishing well of Toledo with Emmanuel McNeil Warren, pair him with the cornerback there out of Toledo, and that could be a possibility. But I always feel like they're going to stick inside in the trenches, specifically offensive line, because I'm looking at Lane Johnson might retire soon. They had some questions on the interior. So to me, like, the Eagles might want to take one of these inside-outside versatile offensive linemen, like a Jennings Dunker comes to mind, because there will be a run on offensive tackles. And I think that's the big issue, is a lot of the tackles are going to come off the board early. And so do you get a guy like a Jennings Dunker who could maybe play guard the first year and then kick outside to right tackle once Lane Johnson departs? Caden Proctor out of Alabama, I think, would be another candidate in the first round with that same kind of possibility. You know, Trey Zune is another guy who played tackle. Cage Casey from Boise State, probably going into that day 2 range now. But I think the Eagles stick on the offensive line. You know, edge rushers are going to come off the board early. Offensive tackles are going to come off the board early. I think the Eagles have to kind of sit back and wait. But, yeah, Proctor to me would be a great fit for the Eagles there in round 1. Now, if they do trade A.J. Brown, you know, we talked about Ted Hurst maybe as a potential mid-round target. And then Chris Bell, to me, is the closest thing to A.J. Brown, who we talked about. You can probably get him on day 2 of the draft. So the Eagles could be looking for an A.J. Brown replacement. Tight ends, I think if they do anything there, they'll probably wait to the back end and latter part of the draft to address that. So, you know, I think they'd love to add an edge rusher. I just don't know in the first round if there's going to be any worthwhile, you know, maybe a TJ Parker if he falls that far, I would consider. But to me, the Eagles are going to go probably offensive line. I'd be surprised if they didn't, but you never know. Corners are going to be tough too, because I don't love the corners. I think there's some good ones, but there you have it, Adam. Well, thank you for tuning in each and every week. I love the consistency and the support. And again, if you want to support the show, go over to allaccessfootball.com, subscribe to the Draft Bible. It's part of the All Access Football annual subscription. You get access to our insider content. We do this all year long, 365. So you'll get all of our insider content throughout the year, as well as the NFL Draft Bible. We're going to have well over 500 in-depth scouting reports, background information, verified measurements, projections, player interviews, everything you could possibly imagine. And like I said, it's I'm not just saying this, I'm living this. It's the best draft guide we've done in 24 years. And if you're not happy with the product, money back guarantee, no questions asked. So check it out, allaccessfootball.com. I think we have the pre-draft sale to midnight. If not, use my discount code RIC VIP. You get 30% off. We survived the polar plunge, baby. It was pretty good, a little windy, but we did survive it. 7,000 people came out to jump in the ocean last weekend here in Seaside Heights. I mentioned the Boston Sports Journal.com. I'm doing some Patriots coverage there. I'll be out at Boston College and UConn Pro Days on Monday and Tuesday. Feel free to say hello if you plan to attend. Also, our good friend Neil Stratton over at InsideTheLeague.com. Every Friday, the Friday wrap, I do a little synopsis on the scouting and agent community. If you're into that sort of thing, I kind of gave a little bit of a teaser on Friday's post with my Dante Moore story. Dante Moore coming out this week talking about his bout with depression and mental health. If you want to go and learn more about that, okay. We had Russ Lande, of course. He mentioned the football GM and scouting course is starting next month. Go over to smww.com and AJ Brown to the Patriots is a possibility. I think it'll go down to the wire. I think it'll go down to draft day when the Eagles actually come off their asking price. I just don't think New England's going to give up 2 first-round picks. Also, our live stream draft coverage will be all 3 days of the NFL draft right here on YouTube. If you're watching now, like it, share it, subscribe it. We got about 4 more of these shows leading up to the draft, and then we'll be live all 3 days during the draft. Also want to give a shout out to my guy, Dave Del Cole. Did a couple of the Scout Honors podcasts in memory of Dave T. Thomas. If you want to go a little bit further into the draft, deep dive, day 3, undrafted free agents, we cover all those names. And of course, coming up soon is going to be the release of our 2027 NFL draft big board. So it does not stop. We just can't stop. Shit. I don't even know how to stop. All right. 33 days to go to destination Pittsburgh. Counting you down, breaking it down, chopping it up each and every Saturday. It's the saddest part of the show when I have to say goodbye, because I could just sit here and talk football with you guys all day long, but I do have to get back to the draft Bible, get my nose back into the book. But I look forward to coming back here next Saturday, talking offensive line. We'll do tackles, we'll do guards, we'll do centers with our guy Russ Lande. I want to give a shout out and special thanks to Russ for checking in from Phoenix today, giving us his hour of power. Always appreciate his time. And I was Rick Serritella for this Saturday, March 21st, 2026. Shout out one more time to all the chat room peoples, Douglas Dorner, Adams Exploits. We even had Skeetra 282 in the chat room today. So always love my chat room people. And enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Buckle up.